There we go. Let's get that decision lined up. What about the other two? Would I need an article for the other two? I don't think I would. No, I would for the January 6th ruling. Okay. I can get through the first two, and then I'll have to look up an article for the third one. So the Supreme Court, let's see, says cities can punish people for sleeping in public places. This is a criminalization of homelessness because that's the only circumstance in which you would do this voluntarily. Although theoretically, it does also ban camping on federal land. But we all know that the law is not going to be applied like that because the people who have enough money to go camping on federal land would be able to afford a lawyer and legal challenges. And in either case, the people who craft homeless bans like these are looking for them to specifically be applied to homeless people, not to weekend campers. Camping will not be banned, or maybe camping will experience a decline, but regardless, the main objective here is to criminalize homelessness and punish homeless people for being degenerate and dirty and whatever. And they'll drag the entirety of society down with them to do that. This is one of the most insidious things about this ruling. It's just because they fucking hate the poor and hate homeless people. Believe it or not, it actually costs more money to give the police more money to bust up homeless encampments, to call the police on like homeless people sleeping in the park and like break it all up and force them out of the city, force them to be displaced somewhere else. So they will house the homeless in prisons. Yeah, and that's more expensive than if you just built affordable housing. Seriously, building housing is not that hard. But if you imprison all homeless people, you actually have to pay for a bunch of administrative, legal, and legal costs. I think I said legal twice. Whatever. Administrative, judicial, and legal costs. There we go. If I didn't get it right the first time, I got it right there. Those costs would be more expensive than just building affordable housing and doing like housing first policy making, implementing some like social safety programs and UBI programs, most of the pilots of which have been very successful, to house the homeless, right? Like that would be taking that approach, the sensible approach, the approach that countries like Finland do, that, it's a known quantity, it's not like uncharted territory, is less expensive than criminalizing homelessness. But the court fucking hates homeless people so much, and conservatives hate homeless people so much, that they would actually rather criminalize the homeless. And quite frankly, it's not even just a conservative thing either. The hatred of homeless people is deeply reactionary. Don't get me wrong. That's not in question. And of course, conservatives are way more reactionary than every other political group. But fundamentally, this is also a flaw inherent to liberalism. Conservatives, remember, are just a different kind of liberal. Fascism is a liberal or post-liberal ideology. It came from the Industrial Revolution when liberalism was the order of the day, politically and economically speaking, right? So a lot of what is present in fascism is also present or was present in liberalism. It's like the worst tendencies of liberal systems amplified. And one of those tendencies is the demonization of the homeless. First off, on a ethical, moral level, and then in codified into legal documents and stuff like that. It sounds crazy, but this is one respect in which life was actually better in the Middle Ages. Or social norms were better, not life in general. Life had a way worse material standard of living in the Middle Ages compared to now. But the social norms surrounding the homeless were actually way better in the Middle Ages compared to now, which is not even to say that they were good. That's how bad things are now. They weren't even good in the Middle Ages for homeless people. But typically, the attitude with which people viewed the homeless in, say, medieval Europe or any place in the world, really, was one of compassion and pity and sympathy, right? Yeah, I don't think so. You're literally wrong on that. If you're trying to refute the what I'm saying about the attitude was better, though, I guess. Oh, I'm so sorry. I completely saw that out of temporal context. Yeah, no, life was not better in the Middle Ages, but the attitudes regarding homeless people were much better. That was my misunderstanding. The attitude towards homeless people in the Middle Ages, you can see this in a lot of surviving historical documents. You can see it in the Bible. In pre-capitalist times was one mostly of pity, right? Because like, man, that sucks. They don't have a house, and their life probably sucks, and I feel bad for them. Very natural reaction, I would think. Right? So you had like certain social structures or halfway built social structures that were relevant to that. Again, not to say things were good, just that they were better than now. And in fact, the way that homeless people are treated now is much more comparable to how lepers were treated in medieval Europe. Lepers ostracized, brutalized and shunned the way that homeless people are now because of the admittedly credible fear of disease spreading. However, I mean, that's not really a reason to go after lepers specifically. Everybody in the fucking world was a vector for disease back in the day. Like, not to say that it's justified, just that it is a little bit more understandable, and doesn't come from a place necessarily of like moral vice, right? It's just literally they're dirty, they didn't shower, that I could get sick if I'm around them for too long, right? And that created a lot of socially reactionary attitudes that stemmed from that. But fundamentally there's a difference, right? Because what ended up happening afterwards, when liberal revolutions started succeeding, which did represent a pretty large increase in the quality of life, when those revolutions started succeeding and those norms became more prevalent, narratives were established along with them, because the name of the game was like, oh well, we're this egalitarian paradise now, like it's a meritocracy. That myth started to take hold. The social narrative changed from one of like, I actually don't even know 100% what the social narrative would have been in medieval Europe, like coherently speaking, but I'm very well acquainted with the myth of meritocracy, which is a liberal phenomenon. That sort of created the implication, which then became codified into the myth itself, that homeless people were homeless because they were less deserving. Right? And it's like, you get what you deserve. And how do I know that you get what you deserve? Because you have it. It's like, you deserve what you have what you deserve. It's a circle of logic. Attitude was better though, I guess. Like in the Middle Ages, the oldest inherited everything. Yeah, that's right. Primogenitor, succession. The other kids would get kicked out to be homeless. But yeah, they were taken care of. Homeless people would go from house to house, or that place would take care of them, out of fear. Yeah, that's right. There was like the fear of divine punishment if you did not lead a Christ-like life, which I think is a better incentive structure than the one that currently exists. Not a difficult thing to, it's not a high bar to clear, but the Middle Ages did clear. No, not because of the divine. Well, certainly in a lot of the Christian countries in Europe, that's what the motivation was. That Christ washed the feet of prostitutes and lepers, and so you should too, because Christ was a holy individual. That is the moral thing to do. And in fact, if you behave in a way that is un-Christ-like, you might incur divine retribution. That was not an insignificant motive in the feudal, like in the Christian world at the time, and also, I think in the Islamic world as well. When the homeless person would go to the next house, who would complain about the lack of hospitality. Yes, that is a thing as well. On a more secular line, or like intersectarian lines, like not specific to any sort of religious mythos, there was a very strong hospitality culture, and yeah, people wanted to avoid being socially shamed in public. With the new economic structures and social structures that were introduced by capitalism, those motives and those incentives lessened. Like it eroded away at the sympathy that people had towards the homeless, because it transformed the entire economy into one of raw competition, where it was like, the cliche is the dog eat dog world mentality, but ultimately it's like that plus, if you can't make it, that just means you weren't good enough, and it's a moral failing on your part. And that, like, of course, it disproportionately impacted the people that were less fortunate, that couldn't really, that couldn't access the same standards of living that wealthier people had, right? And that means homeless people, most of all. All that to say, that is the root ideology of the ruling that came from the Supreme Court regarding the status of homeless people in America. It is actually liberalism. Liberalism is the reason that this shit happens. That homelessness is criminalized, because in a liberal economic or socioeconomic system, people's like moral worth is almost entirely dependent on their economic output or their wealth, basically. Your money, the money doesn't just become something with which you are able to access higher standards of goods and services. It also becomes the access by which you are morally judged, which is fucked up in a hierarchical system such as this. And I mean, it's fucked up in any system that like assign greater inherent moral worth to people who have a bigger number next to their name. Not a huge fan, gotta say. And understand that it might sound like, from an American perspective, it might sound like I'm throwing pot shots at the left or blaming the left for this in some form. I am not. Liberals in the United States and everywhere else are not necessarily a constituent part of the left. What I am doing is criticizing everybody that adheres to a capitalist ideology. And you need 2 shrooms for that, okay. Because liberalism is not necessarily a left or right thing. In fact, relative to the current political spectrum, liberalism is a right-wing ideology at its core. It is just a capitalist ideology, and conservatives are included. When I say liberals, I also mean conservatives, because they are also pro-capitalist. In many respects, that liberals believe in free markets and the sort of meritocratic world order and distribution of economic goods and services. Conservatives are also like that. That kind of existed before that too. Like, you could buy indulgences for your sins. For sure. Like, hierarchy is nothing new. And I'm not saying that capitalism is specifically hierarchical as opposed to other systems. I'm saying that the hierarchy in capitalism is a very different hierarchy from the hierarchies in feudal Europe. Yes, money could get you a long way in feudal Europe. In many ways that was there. That was there in feudal Europe as well. That sort of moral worth for having more money or whatever. But it is like the main feature of capitalism, that your moral worth, not even on a religious level, on a secular level, your moral worth is judged by how much money you have. In feudal Europe, it was a little bit different. There was still a little bit more of that aristocratic Platonic mythos of nobles being of royal blood, or of some sort of special blood that gave them a more holy essence or something like that. Really wacky shit. And I have no doubt that when we transcend capitalism eventually, the myth of meritocracy is going to sound just as stupid as that sounds to us right now. Because it is, ultimately. But yes, sorry, long winding road. That is to say, I've explained the sort of hierarchical tendencies of liberalism here surrounding markets and money, to explain that this is the underpinning ideology of the Supreme Court, and this is why they decided 6-3 along partisan lines to criminalize, or to allow the criminalization of homelessness, because that part of their worldview informs their belief that homeless people are functionally subhuman, because they are people but without a number next to their name. They don't have any money to speak of. They don't have any resources, And that's just one of the rulings. This, by the way, this ruling has implications of its own. The homelessness ruling. This is going to make homelessness a way bigger problem than it was. It's going to lead to unprecedented state like crimes against humanity against the homeless population. And when I say state, I mean like the federal government in part, because the federal government's going to be kind of checkmarking these decisions by the states. They're like giving the rubber stamp of approval and stuff like that. But I also mean state as in at the state level. This is where most of the these anti-homeless laws are going to be passed. And at the local level as well, because the local level is where a lot of like homeowners and the homeowners association, the sort of old boomers who want their houses to continue to increase in value, and that's their main, political underpinning. That's where they're driving the politics the most directly. So it's gonna be bad. In fact, the treatment of the homeless in the United States, I would see taking a pretty similar path in a really not good way to the treatment of the Romani in Europe, the nomadic peoples. Nice. I ate 2 blue shells that game and still got first. What a... I think I raced pretty good. But if you can believe it, that is the Supreme Court ruling with the fewest wide-ranging consequences and implications out of the 3 that happened recently. The other one, which I will also not be pulling up an article for because I remember it for the most part, is something regarding the, quote, Chevron deference. Now, because it's America and this is actually 18 companies wearing a giant trench coat and not a real country, it is, of course, named for the Chevron company. This is a petrol company, but the decision itself is actually pretty important, right? Basically, it just says that, like, yeah, you know, when Congress writes a law that has regulations in it, and it gives that to the executive branch, you know, like the president and the agencies, they can sort of fill in the blanks if there are any question marks. Like, oh, what do they mean by this exactly? Well, you know, we can kind of reasonably guess, like, okay, but they mean this much and whatever. So, like, with stuff like the Clean Air and Water Act, Congress doesn't necessarily set all the specific measurements for, like, how clean does the air or water have to be. That's up to the executive agencies as per this decision. This specifically grants the executive government the, like, authority to do things, basically, you know, that go just a little bit outside the bounds of a congressional law if there's, like, needs to be some interpretation, because, like, I don't know what this means, dude, you know? Ow. And the Supreme Court was like, nah, actually, we should get to decide what this means. So now, like, this decision paralyzes the entire government of the United States. Understand that, like, people meme on Congress being ineffective and the government being ineffective. That shit is the realest fucking meme you've ever seen in your life. Give me that. This is, you know, Congress as of late has been especially unproductive, and this Congress in particular, running from 2022 to through the end of this year, has been actually the least productive Congress in American history, passing, I think, only enough laws for me to count on one hand. That is really fucking low for the American government, right? So Congress already can't do anything, and now because of this this new ruling, the president and the executive branch of government, all the agencies and stuff, the administrative state, can't do anything either. So the legislature can't do anything. The administration can't do anything. Who can do anything? The Supreme Court. That's right. The Supreme Court literally consolidated all that power in themselves. The Supreme Court, I'm a Supreme Court abolitionist now. Yeah, and this makes me even more of a Supreme Court abolitionist than I already was, which is quite an accomplishment, you know? So, like, if anything at the federal level is going to happen, it's going to be through the Supreme Court. And there are 6 Hitlerites on the Supreme Court. This is actually, like, this is part of the 2025, the Project 2025 playbook. You know, the conservative plan to do functionally a fascist takeover of the U.S. government. This is a big part of that plan, is taking over the Supreme Court, which the conservatives were pretty successful at, and then co-opting it to serve their means. It was like, it's like, the 1-2, like, basically take over the Supreme Court, then make it so that only the Supreme Court can do stuff, then take over all the other branches of government through the Supreme Court, then restore power back to those branches once we control everything, and then do all, like, the fascist bullshit. I'm gonna get third? Yeah. We unanimously decided that we should have all the power. Yeah, and it was, I think it was a 7-2 ruling. 7 of the Supreme Court justices decided, yes, we should have all the power. And 2 of them were like, what the fuck? No, that's stupid. And of course, the 2 votes in dissent don't matter. They're dissenting votes. But, Supreme Court got their way. This is how empires die. I know it's like, the West has fallen. Billions must die. But if you take a look at some historical parallels throughout history of other empires, one of the things that precedes their fall is stagnation. And that ultimately being manifest through government deadlocks and through, like, basically weird bureaucratic trickery that paralyzes the bureaucratic apparatus into not being able to do anything. This is most evident, I think, with the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire. In the Roman Republic, it was like the rules in the Senate were so convoluted that they couldn't do anything, even if somebody actually wanted to, because the process was so long and arduous and like had to go through so many proxies. And it was already kind of like that in the U.S. The liberum veto, killing the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, is a better example. I'm prepared to agree, but I don't know fully what you're talking about. If you could elaborate, that would be great. But, yeah, it very well could be. And of course, it's not a coincidence as well. The Supreme Court is the most reactionary and conservative branch of the U.S. government by design, but then also by like ideology as well. They want to have a reactionary fascist agenda and stuff like that. And the other branches of government are comparatively actually less fascist and less reactionary. So the Supreme Court basically, like the Republican Party through the Supreme Court, is trying to get them out of the way. Like, if the whole government agrees it takes one person to stop the law or the reform from passing, yeah, that's right. Yes, that is a very paralyzing force. Because in Congress, it's like, or in the United States, we have sort of an equivalent. We have the veto, but that's like, there's actually a workaround there. Congress can pass a law, and if the president really doesn't want to sign it, they can veto it, and it doesn't become a law. But at the same time, there are 2 things that sort of limit the power of a veto. Number one, the president can be overruled by Congress. If 2/3 of a Congress passes a law, if it passes with a 2/3 majority, the president can't veto it. It just becomes law anyways, even if the president doesn't sign it. And then also, vetoing a law is actually like kind of taboo. Like, there's a little bit of a social stigma against presidents just vetoing all the laws that come to their desk. It's like an unthinkable thing. And I actually think that if a president decided to start doing that, then like they would incur some real consequences from the party leadership and stuff like that. Obviously, that's a little bit of like liberal wishful thinking on some level, but there's historical inertia that prevents presidents from vetoing everything that they get, and also the fact that vetoes aren't bulletproof. If 2/3 of the government decides, yes, this will be law, then the veto does nothing. It becomes law anyways, right? So there were like just these tiny little pitiful gasps of breath coming from the government that was like, no, wait, theoretically Congress could still do something. But then now Congress can't do anything because of, like corruption has reached a tipping point, and like the interests of private capital have so thoroughly paralyzed Congress that now no laws are even getting passed to be vetoed or not vetoed. And then of course the executive branch has some limited authority to pass what are called executive orders and whatever, and that means the government can kind of do stuff, because they can enforce laws slightly differently that already exist. That's a thing that they can do. But now the Supreme Court has made it so that they can't even do that. So the only part of the federal government that can do anything is the Supreme Court. They have all the power, functionally speaking. Theoretically, Congress also has power, but like, Congress passing a law? Nah. Not in this fucking session. So here we have the stagnation. And then when the reactionaries take over the United States, that's when you start to get the fall of an empire, right? Because reactionary economic policymaking is dog shit. The best thing that Republicans have in terms of economic policy is loosening up labor protections, child labor, lowering wages, busting unions, and basically just concentrating wealth in the hands of business owners who do all of jack shit, right? Their plan would kill this country economically. It's austerity politics like times 10. Right? And that's if the conservatives are successful, that's the process we're going to see. Now, if the liberals are successful, that doesn't necessarily mean any of that isn't going to happen. But you know, it's like Jesus Christ, delay the inevitable just a little bit more. Like ultimately, this is why countries need socialism. This is why socialism is such a necessary thing, because otherwise countries die a slow and painful death, either through the regression of social norms or through the regression of economic policy. And this is how it starts: is that the country gets paralyzed and can't do anything. And there are various waves of paralyzation, austerity, with reactionism sprinkled in everywhere. You know. But that's only ruling 2 out of 3. If you can believe it, there's a third ruling that is arguably as bad, if not worse, as the other one that I just described. And it has to do with the January 6th rioters, right? Like the insurrection people. I don't have an article for that. I would like to pull one up, so I think I will drive the rest of this race, and then I will I'll go look for a news article that covers the Supreme Court decision about the January 6th rioters, many of whom have actually been on trial, and it has to do with those trials. Oh boy. SCOTUS judges rule for January 6th defendant. Oh shit. Here we go. Let's go to the BBC for this one. Supreme Court casts doubt on hundreds of January 6 cases. Well, that's not good. Federal prosecutors, according to the Supreme Court, federal prosecutors overreached when using an obstruction law to charge hundreds of January 6 rioters. The Supreme Court ruled as much in an opinion that could also affect a case against Donald Trump. The justices ruled that obstruction charges must include proof that defendants tried to tamper with or destroy documents. Nah, dog. Nah. The obstruction in the January 6 cases was just them going and, like, trying to forcibly stop the counting of votes to certify an election. A process in which there is little, if any, documentation, because this is done by a verbal vote. They know what they're doing. The Supreme Court 100% knows what they're doing here. So basically, they're saying that prosecutors against insurrectionists, picture this as like the putschists in Germany, in Nazi Germany, or pre-Nazi Germany, Weimar Germany. And judges are saying, like, now we think the prosecutors were too mean against the beer hall putsch guys, because that's what they're saying here. You know, this allows them, by the way, this enables a lot of those people, those defendants, to challenge the rulings that were issued in their cases. A lot of like the far right is gonna walk free after having literally committed a crime against the whole fucking country because of this. You know, I'm not usually Mr. Crimes Against the State kind of guy in terms of like what I care about people doing, because like states fucking suck. But like, this is a peaceful transfer of power, one of the few good things that like a state potentially offers. And they're like, nah, you know, that thing that actually keeps society stable and like actually doesn't hurt anybody, we don't like that. We like the things that do hurt people, such as fascist takeovers of government and military juntas, right? And impeding the routine process of like one administration transferring to another is like the highest kind of crime that there is. And of course, because it's the highest kind of crime that we have, there is no punishment for it, and there is no law for it, because this is a fucking liberal dystopian hellhole where the mindset of nothing ever happens has penetrated everything. And that has given the Supreme Court leeway to decide that, like, actually, I think you were too mean to the Hitlerites. You know? Oh, of course. The case was brought to the Supreme Court by Joseph Fisher, a former police officer from Pennsylvania who attended the rally in D.C. on January 6, 2021. Then briefly went inside the Capitol. So this case was brought by an insurrectionist saying, the prosecutors have been too mean to us. And then the Supreme Court was like, yeah, they were actually. That's fine, actually. Which, incredibly, does mirror almost one-to-one the kind of judicial attitudes that existed in Weimar Germany, where the like somebody would murder a Jewish person and say, Your Honor, I only did it because there was a Jewish plot, and the judge would essentially agree, yeah, you know what, there was a Jewish plot. I think they were too mean to you, or something like that. Hopefully, a Democrat will be in charge in this. When the next Supreme Court judges are picked. Dog, I hate to break it to you, having a Democrat in charge isn't going to fix this. I've already outlined why Democrats are so fucking incompetent and don't understand how politics works, because they're stuck in the 90s. If a Democrat is in charge, the Supreme Court justices won't retire. You think there's a deadline for those Supreme Court justices? No, they serve for life. They're unelected. They serve until they die. It won't fix it, but less damage. Yeah, like only marginally. Like at this point, a lot of the die has been cast. Like a Democrat being in charge, like I said, is only really going to delay the inevitable. So we have to start planning for that now. We have to start thinking about how the fuck do you combat this? Because like, obviously, vote for a Democrat, and all that. Like, that has to be part of your plan because they are the lesser evil. Voting for the lesser evil is always part of the strategy, but it can't be the whole strategy, right? Hope is not a tactic. Hey, editing Y2K here. This is not super common, but I just wanted to say that this is actually part one of two about in this political segment. You'll have to stay tuned for the sequel. This segment, of course, was about the Supreme Court and three rulings that already pretty much broke the whole country on a institutional level, and of course on a systemic level, just made everything even worse. But that was before I was made aware of the decision in the Trump immunity case. Now, I was under the impression, like a lot of other people, that the Supreme Court was just going to kick the can down the road until Donald Trump got elected so that it functionally wouldn't matter either way. But they decided to just go ahead and rule that Donald Trump is above the law, which is interesting because it means that they're not expecting any blowback from doing that. And so far, they seem to have been correct on that front. People are not outraged enough for them to regret the decision in any way. I'll talk about that decision, what it means, and stuff like that more next stream. But just know that editing me was aware that had happened, and I won't be going into the next stream completely blind or anything like that. I just, I gotta get done with this one first, and I feel like these segments will be closely related enough, in fact, on more or less the same subject matter, to just be like complementary parts to one another. In fact, there's going to be a lot of things that I mentioned in this segment that will come up in the next segment, a la legal groundwork for a institutional coup d'etat and fascist takeover. But with that said, thank you for watching. Hopefully I'll see you next time, and bye.